The autumn rain fell steadily outside my office window as I reviewed the quarterly reports for my tech company. At 32, I had built something I could be proud of, a $400 million enterprise that started from nothing but determination and the $50 bill I kept framed on my wall. The same $50 my sister Jessica threw at me 10 years ago when she kicked me out of our family home. My phone buzzed. Another missed call from my mother, the third one today. I glanced at the $50 bill in its simple black frame, a reminder of where I came from and why I would never go back. The security system chimed, alerting me to movement at the main gate. I switched to the camera feed and froze. There she was, Jessica, my successful, perfect, favored sister, standing in the rain, clutching two battered suitcases. Her designer clothes were soaked, her carefully maintained hair plastered to her face. The sight brought me back to that night, 10 years ago, when our roles were reversed. "You're nothing but a burden," she had screamed, throwing my clothes onto the front lawn. "Mom and Dad left me in charge while they're away, and I say you're out." I was 22 then, fresh out of college with a computer science degree, had worked 3 jobs to pay for. Jessica, 2 years older, had just moved back home after her third failed attempt at graduate school, all funded by our parents, of course. The security phone buzzed. "Ms. Wilson, there's a woman at the gate claiming to be your sister. Should we send her away?" I stared at the monitor. Jessica had always been the pretty one, the charming one, the one who could do no wrong. Now she looked broken, desperate. Part of me wanted to press the button and have security escort her off my property. But first, I needed to understand how we got here. 10 years earlier, I sat at our family's kitchen table, surrounded by circuit boards and coding manuals. My laptop hummed as I worked on a project that would later become the foundation of my company. Jessica burst in, fresh from another shopping spree. "Still playing with your little computers?" she sneered, dropping designer bags on the counter. "You know Mom and Dad are worried about you. All this tech stuff isn't ladylike." I didn't respond, focusing on my work. I learned long ago that engaging with Jessica only led to more drama. But she wasn't done. "They're going to be gone for 2 weeks, and they left me in charge," she continued, examining her manicure. "Maybe it's time for some changes around here." I looked up then, catching something dangerous in her tone. "What do you mean?" "Well, for starters, I need your room. My friend Melissa needs a place to stay, and the guest room is just too small for her taste." "That's ridiculous," I said, closing my laptop. "I've lived in that room my entire life. And that's the problem." Jessica slammed her hand on the table. "You're 22, Emma. Normal people your age don't live with their parents. You just leech off them while playing with your computers." "I pay rent," I reminded her. "And I'm working on something important." "Important?" she laughed. "Your little coding projects. Wake up, Emma. You're just embarrassing the family. Melissa comes from money. Having you here, looking like that, living like this, it's mortifying." I looked down at my simple jeans and t-shirt, then at her designer outfit. We'd always been different, Jessica and I. She got our parents' credit cards. I got summer jobs. She got new cars. I got bus passes. She got praise. I got silence. The next few days were tense. Jessica's friend Melissa moved in, taking over most of the common areas with her loud voice and expensive tastes. I kept to my room, working on my project, trying to stay out of their way. But I could feel the storm coming. It broke on a Wednesday night. I came home from my part-time job to find my room door open. Jessica and Melissa were inside, going through my things. "What are you doing?" I demanded. Jessica turned, holding my external hard drive, the one with all my project data. "Spring cleaning," she said with a cold smile. "This room is now Melissa's walk-in closet. Your stuff is on the lawn." "You can't do this." I lunged for my hard drive, but Melissa blocked me. "Actually, I can," Jessica said. "Mom and Dad left me in charge, remember? And they've always said we need to be hospitable to guests. I live here. I pay rent. Not anymore." She reached into her pocket and threw a $50 bill at me. "Here's your rent money back. Now get out." What followed was a blur of humiliation and rage. My clothes scattered on the wet grass. My books thrown into puddles. My computer equipment tossed carelessly onto the driveway. Neighbors peeked through their curtains as I scrambled to save what I could. "You're not worth more than this," Jessica called from the doorway, waving the $50 bill before throwing it at me. "Consider yourself evicted." I tried calling our parents, but they were on a cruise. When I finally reached them days later, Jessica had already spun her version of events. I was unstable, she said. I was hostile to their guest. I had chosen to leave. And they believed her. They always believed her. That night, I slept in my car, my salvaged possessions crammed in the backseat. The next day, I withdrew my savings, $3,427, and found a tiny studio apartment in the worst part of town. The kind of place Jessica wouldn't be caught dead in. But it had internet, and that was all I needed. I worked during the day at my job and coded all night. My project, a revolutionary security algorithm, became my lifeline. I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, pouring every spare dollar into development costs. When I wasn't coding, I was learning about business, about patents, about venture capital. 6 months later, I had a working prototype. A year after that, I had my first investor meeting. The algorithm worked better than anyone expected, and suddenly the big tech companies were calling. 2 years after Jessica threw me out, I sold my first company for $40 million. But I wasn't done. I started another company, then another. Each success built on the last, driven by that burning memory of standing in the rain with nothing but a $50 bill and a determination to prove my worth. Now, 10 years later, I was worth more than my entire family combined. My latest company, Secure Flow Technologies, was revolutionizing cybersecurity. I had offices in 3 countries, a mansion in the hills, and that $50 bill framed on my wall, a reminder of where I started. The security phone buzzed again. "Ms. Wilson, your sister is still at the gate. She's asking to speak with you. Says it's urgent." I studied Jessica's image on the monitor. Her mascara ran in black streaks down her face. Her expensive clothes were ruined by the rain. She looked exactly like I must have looked that night, standing in a storm with nowhere to go. "Ms. Wilson," the security guard prompted. I picked up the phone, my eyes fixed on the framed $50 bill. "Let her wait," I said quietly. "I need to make a few calls first." Within an hour, I had the full story. It hadn't taken much, just a few calls to my private investigator and some quick database searches. The perfect life Jessica had cultivated was crumbling. Her third husband had left her, taking most of their joint assets. The luxury boutique she'd opened with our parents' money had failed spectacularly. She was facing bankruptcy, lawsuits, and potential criminal charges for some creative accounting. Our parents, now retired and living on a fixed income thanks to Jessica's draining of their accounts, couldn't help. None of her rich friends would take her calls. She had burned every bridge, spent every dollar, and now she was at my gate, holding the bags that contained all she had left. I should have felt satisfaction, vindication. But all I felt was a strange calm as I watched her on the security feed, remembering her words from that night. "You're not worth more than this." The rain continued to fall as I stood from my desk, straightening my designer suit, one that cost more than the entire house I'd been thrown out of. I took the framed $50 bill off the wall and slipped it into my pocket. It was time to greet my sister. I took the elevator down to the ground floor of my mansion, each step measured and deliberate. The $50 bill felt heavy in my pocket, a weight of history, of memories, of choices made and paths taken. The security guard, James, met me at the front door with an umbrella. "She's still there, Ms. Wilson. Been crying for the last 20 minutes. "How many times has she tried to visit before?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "This is the first time," James replied. "But she's been calling the gate every day for the past week. We followed protocol and didn't inform you, as per your instructions about family members." I nodded, appreciating his discretion. After my success, I'd had to establish strict protocols. First came the distant relatives I'd never met, then old family friends, and finally my parents, all seeking to reconnect, once news of my wealth became public. But Jessica had never reached out until now. The drive to the gate in my golf cart was short, but it gave me time to observe her. She'd lost weight, too much. Her designer clothes, once worn with such pride, hung loose on her frame. She was hunched over her bags, trying to shield them from the rain with her body. The Jessica I knew would never have risked ruining her appearance like this. I stopped the cart a few feet from the gate. Through the iron bars, our eyes met. Recognition flashed across her face, followed by something I'd never seen there before. Shame. "Emma," she whispered, her voice hoarse. You look successful." I finished for her. "Worth more than $50. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. I deserve that. I deserve worse. But please just let me explain. I pulled the framed bill from my pocket, holding it up so the security lights illuminated it through the glass. I kept it, your parting gift. It's been my most valuable possession. Emma, I'm sorry. I was horrible. I was jealous and cruel and… Jealous? I cut her off. Of what? The sister who worked 3 jobs to pay for college? The one who lived on ramen while you had unlimited credit cards? The one you threw out into the rain? Tears mixed with the raindrops on her face. Of your strength, your intelligence, your purpose. I never had any of that. I just had mom and dad's money and approval. And now you have nothing. I finished. Just 2 bags and nowhere to go. Funny how life works. She nodded, not meeting my eyes. I tried everything. Called everyone. Nobody will help. The lawyers say I'll probably face charges for the boutique's finances. Mark left me for his secretary and froze all our accounts. Mom and dad. She trailed off. Can't help because you drained the retirement fund for your failed business ventures? I supplied. Yes, I know all about that. I know everything, Jessica. I've had you investigated thoroughly since you started calling the gate. She seemed to shrink further. Of course you did. You always were the smart one. I studied her for a long moment. The rain had slowed to a drizzle. But she was thoroughly soaked. Her expensive makeup had turned her tears black, making her look like a tragic painting, beautiful even in despair. That was Jessica's gift. She could make even failure look glamorous. Why here? I asked finally. Why come to me, after everything? She looked up then, and for the first time, I saw my sister without her mask of superiority. Because you're the only one who ever succeeded on your own. Everyone else in my life, they were just like me, living on borrowed money and fake prestige. But you built something real, something lasting. I pressed the intercom. James opened the gate. Jessica's eyes widened with hope, but I wasn't finished. Bring her to the guest house, I continued. The small one, by the service entrance. The gate swung open silently. Jessica grabbed her bags, but before she could step through, I held up my hand. Wait, I said, pulling out my phone. I transferred exactly $50 to the security office account. James, please give my sister $50 from the petty cash. Consider it her entrance fee. Jessica's face crumpled, but she took the money when James offered it. She understood the symmetry, the justice of it. 10 years ago, she'd given me $50 to leave. Now I was giving her $50 to enter. The guest house has basic furnishings, I told her as James helped with her bags. You'll find some dry clothes in your size in the closet. Once you're changed, we'll talk. Thank you, she whispered. Emma, don't thank me yet. I cut her off. This isn't forgiveness. This is curiosity. I want to understand how the mighty Jessica Wilson ended up at her little sister's gate in the rain. I watched through the cameras as James escorted her to the guest house. It was small by my property standards, just 2 rooms and a bathroom. But it was still nicer than that first apartment I'd rented after she threw me out. An hour later, my phone buzzed. She's changed and settled, Ms. Wilson, James reported. Would you like me to bring her to the main house? I looked at the framed $50 bill on my desk, then at the rain-streaked windows of my office. No, I decided. I'll go to her. Some conversations need a smaller stage. The walk to the guest house gave me time to steel myself. I had questions that needed answers, and for the first time in our lives, Jessica wasn't in a position to deflect or manipulate. She would tell me the truth, or she would leave, this time with exactly what she'd given me, $50 and nowhere to go. The woman who opened the guest house door looked both more and less like my sister. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by the simple jeans and sweater I'd left for her. Without her usual armor of makeup and pretense, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and more like me than I'd ever noticed before. Sit, I said, gesturing to one of the 2 chairs in the small living area. It's time we had an honest conversation about family, responsibility, and consequences. Jessica sank into the chair, clutching the $50 bill like a lifeline. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the night was far from over. The silence between us stretched like a taut wire. Jessica sat across from me, still clutching that $50 bill, her knuckles white. The small guest house suddenly felt even smaller, charged with a decade of unspoken words. Start from the beginning, I said, my voice steady. And don't leave anything out. Jessica took a shaky breath. After that night, everything seemed perfect at first. Mom and Dad were proud of me for taking charge of the situation. Melissa's family introduced me to their social circle. I met Mark at one of their parties. Your third husband, I noted. The one who just left you. She nodded, a bitter smile crossing her face. Mark seemed perfect. Old money, connections, everything I thought I wanted. We got married 6 months after meeting. Mom and Dad spent nearly all their savings on the wedding. $127,000, I supplied. I have the bank records. Jessica's eyes widened. You really did investigate everything. Knowledge is power. Continue. The first few years were good. Or I thought they were. Mark handled all the finances. I spent, he paid. I wanted to open a boutique. He arranged the loans. But she twisted the $50 bill in her hands. I never really learned how to manage money, how to build something real. Like Mom and Dad never taught us, I observed. They just gave you everything and expected me to figure it out on my own. They loved you, Jessica protested weakly. No, I corrected her. They tolerated me. They loved you. There's a difference. Tears welled in her eyes again. I know that now. When everything started falling apart, when the boutique was failing and Mark was getting distant, I finally understood what real love isn't. It isn't throwing money at problems. It isn't choosing one child over another. And it definitely isn't throwing your sister out into the rain. I leaned forward. What happened to the boutique? I thought I could run it on style and connections alone. But there were taxes, regulations, inventory costs. I started moving money around, taking from one account to cover another. Then I borrowed from Mom and Dad's retirement fund, promising to pay it back when business improved. But it never did. No, she whispered. Mark found out about the creative accounting. He didn't just leave, he reported me to the authorities. Said he had to protect himself from liability. That same week, Mom and Dad discovered their retirement account was empty. And all my so-called friends, she laughed hollowly. Turns out they only liked me when I was picking up the dinner tab. I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at my illuminated gardens. You know what I remember most about the night you threw me out? Not the rain, not the humiliation. I remember watching through the window as you and Melissa laughed, trying on my clothes like they were costumes in a play. Jessica made a small, wounded sound. You took everything I owned and treated it like a joke, I continued. My work, my dreams, my dignity, all worth less than your friend's need for a walk-in closet. I was a monster, Jessica admitted. I've had 10 years to realize that. I turned back to her. No, you were a product. Mom and Dad's perfect creation. Entitled, spoiled, and completely unprepared for real life. But here's what I don't understand. Why did you come to me sooner? My success wasn't a secret. You knew where I was. Pride, she said simply. Shame. Fear, pick one. I couldn't face what I'd done, what I'd become. It was easier to keep pretending, keep spending, keep running. Until I couldn't anymore. I pulled out my phone and opened a document. The boutique's debt is $2.3 million. The criminal charges could carry up to 5 years in prison. Mom and Dad's retirement fund held $486,000, all gone. Mark's lawyers are seeking another $1 million in the divorce settlement. Jessica's face had gone pale. I didn't know the total was that high. It's actually higher, I said, scrolling down. But these are the immediate problems, the ones that brought you to my gate in the rain. I deserve prison, she whispered. I deserve worse. I put my phone away and pulled out the framed $50 bill, removing it from behind the glass. You know what this taught me? It taught me that rock bottom is actually a foundation. You can build on it, if you're willing to do the work. Hope flickered in her eyes. Emma, I'm not giving you money, I said firmly. I'm not paying your debts or buying off your problems. The hope died, she nodded, starting to rise. Sit down, I commanded. I'm not finished. She sank back into the chair. I'm offering you something more valuable than money, I continued. I'm offering you what Mom and Dad never gave either of us. A chance to learn, to grow, to become something real. I held out the $50 bill, the same one she'd thrown at me 10 years ago. Take it, not as a gift or a loan, but as your first investment in yourself." With trembling fingers, she took the worn bill. "I don't understand." "You're going to stay in his guest house," I explained. "You're going to work in my company, starting in the mailroom, minimum wage. You'll learn every aspect of building something from nothing. No shortcuts, no special treatment. Just like I did. But the debts, the charges. My lawyers will negotiate with the prosecutors. Community service instead of prison time. A payment plan for mom and dad's retirement fund. But you'll pay every cent yourself from what you earn. It might take 20 years, but you'll do it." Tears rolled down her cheeks, but these were different from before. "Why would you help me at all, after what I did?" I walked to the door, then turned back. "Because 10 years ago, you showed me exactly who you were. Now I'm giving you the chance to show me who you can become." "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "This is harder than prison. This is about rebuilding yourself from the ground up. Are you ready for that?" Jessica looked down at the $50 bill in her hands, then back at me with determination in her eyes. "Yes, I'm ready." I nodded and opened the door. "Get some sleep. You start work at 7 a.m. sharp. James will show you where to go." As I walked back to my mansion under the clearing sky, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something else. A chance to rewrite our story, not just hers or mine, but ours. The night I'd been thrown out had broken something in our family. Maybe, just maybe, this night could be the beginning of fixing it. 1 year later, I stood at my office window, watching the sunrise paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. On my desk, a report detailed Jessica's progress over the past 12 months. James had been thorough in his observations as always. She hadn't missed a single day of work. She started in the mailroom, just as I decreed, sorting letters and packages for minimum wage. She took the bus every morning, brown-bagged her lunch, and stayed late to learn the computer systems. After 3 months, she earned a promotion to data entry. 3 months after that, she moved up to customer service. Now she was training to be a junior project coordinator, having impressed her supervisors with her dedication and newly discovered work ethic. More importantly, she'd stuck to our agreement. 20% of every paycheck went to our parents' retirement fund. It wasn't much. At this rate, it would take her nearly 20 years to repay them. But she hadn't missed a single payment. The criminal charges had been reduced to misdemeanors in exchange for community service, which she performed on weekends at a local women's shelter. Her divorce from Mark had been finalized, leaving her with nothing but her debts and her determination to change. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in," I called, already knowing who it was. Jessica entered, dressed in simple business attire, a far cry from her designer days. She carried a small gift-wrapped package. "Happy birthday," she said softly. "I know we haven't celebrated together in, well, a long time." I took the package, noting its light weight. Inside was a frame, similar to the one that had once held the $50 bill. But this frame contained something different. A paycheck stub from her first week in the mailroom, along with a handwritten note. Day 1 of becoming someone worth being proud of. "I've been saving these," she explained. "Every paycheck, every small victory. Building my own wall of memories like you did with that 50. I placed the frame on my desk, next to my latest industry achievement award. "Sit down," I said. "We need to talk." Fear flickered across her face, the old fear of rejection, of not being enough. But she sat back straight, ready to face whatever came. "Your supervisors say you're excelling in your training," I began. "They've recommended you for an accelerated management program." "I don't want special treatment," she said quickly. "I want to earn everything like you did." I smiled, her real smile, perhaps the first one I'd shared with her in years. "That's exactly why you deserve this opportunity. You've changed, Jessica." Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She'd learned to be stronger than her emotions. "Because you gave me the chance to, when everyone else, including our parents, had written me off as a lost cause." "No," I corrected her. "Because you took that chance and turned it into something real. The old Jessica would have quit after the first week of minimum wage work." She laughed softly. "The old Jessica wouldn't have survived one day without her credit cards." I opened my desk drawer and pulled out an envelope. "Which is why I think you're ready for this." Inside was a lease agreement for a small apartment, close to the office. The guest house was never meant to be permanent, I explained. You've earned the right to start building your own life again. Emma, she started, but I held up my hand. This isn't charity. You'll pay market rent, utilities, everything. But it's a step forward. A foundation for whatever you choose to become next. She took the envelope with steady hands, hands that had learned the value of hard work and honest earnings. Thank you, not just for this, but for being tough enough to show me who I really was, and patient enough to help me become who I could be. I stood and walked to the window, gesturing for her to join me. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across my company's campus. 10 years ago, you gave me $50 and threw me out into the rain. It was the best thing you could have done. How so? Because it taught me that sometimes losing everything is the only way to find out what you're truly worth. I turned to face her. You had to learn the same lesson. The hard way, just like I did. She nodded, understanding at last. So what happens now? Now, I smiled. Now we both keep building, separately, but together, as real sisters should. Outside, a new day was beginning. And for the first time in a decade, we were both ready to face it, not as the people we had been, but as the people we had chosen to become.